What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with yet another album review, and today I'm talking about yet another debut full-length from a band that I've been curious to check out for a little bit. I am talking about the debut offering from Norwegian brutal technical death metal upstarts Celestial Scourge with Observers of the Inevitable. This also came out on February 28th, this time on Time to Kill Records. And like I said, this is their first full-length album. They have an EP that came out a couple of years ago. And yeah, this is, like I said, a Norwegian brutal technical death metal band that actually features current members of my boys Blood Red Throne, particularly Gunnar on bass and Sindre Johnson on guitars. Not doing vocals, he's actually doing guitar work. But you do have a third one, and that's Christopher London, who's actually also the live drummer for Blood Red Throne. Whenever Freddie Balzo isn't playing live for them, Christopher steps in. So this is basically half of Blood Red Throne right here in this band, as well as some people from other bands such as Deception, among many others. So I was curious to check this out, considering I'm friends with Gunnar, and glad to hear and see that he's doing a lot better after he had an illness happen a couple years ago. But he's back up and kicking ass, and I'm proud of him for it. So I wanted to check this out mainly because he's my buddy, and also I'm always on the lookout for whatever he's up to. Musically, that is. And, well, we kick things off with the advent of Deities. Starts off with these, like, almost sci-fi sounding guitars before you get into this, like, chugging gallop. Now, if there's one big thing that does pop up quite a bit on here, little atonal guitars or little atonal melodies get peppered in certain sections on songs. But it follows with, like, awesome chugs and groove. And actually, this track as a whole kind of reminds me a little bit of, like, more recent Job for a Cowboy, like Sun Eater and Moon Healer. Like, it sounds like elements of those two albums done in this track. But you also, when it comes down to the guitar work, it's frantic. It's plenty frantic across the board on this album. But here you get some, like, little sweeps and even, like, a true blue guitar solo. Tons of blast beats and some old school death metal riffing going on. Now, breakdowns plenty on this album, which adds to that brutal death metal aspect of the album. But also, towards the end of this opening track, you even get some guitar harmonies, which don't appear really much at all after this track. But then you get into a track like Vessels, where it just goes right to the jugular with technical death metal precision. And I'm not talking about, like, the guitar wankery technical death metal. I'm talking about technical death metal where it's technical and complex in its execution. But you do get some of those, like, classic old school death metal tremolo riffs. Now, the tremolos, when they do show up really on this whole album, definitely makes me think of Blood Red Throne, but also makes me think of bands like Cannibal Corpse, Vital Remains, Morbid Angel, maybe even a little Incantation, because they do get more on the sinister side of things here and there. But the breakdown here on Vessels definitely reminds me a little bit of a Suffocation breakdown. Exterminated, this one is just bonkers. This is another one of those more bonker songs. Like, it starts off with these tremolos and blasts that feel like more closer to Cryptopsy than anything else, like Blasphemy Made Flesh, None So Vile, kind of in that vein. And it even gets a little bit on the thrashy side of the scale, but it does get into Gravity Blasts. Like, Gravity Blasts show up here as well as on the closer Ancient Forms. Man, Gravity Blasts, it's like when you're trying to use going up and down on the stick so damn fast while keeping time. It's impressive, to say the very least. I've seen videos of people do Gravity Blasts, and it's like, how? But there's more angular riffs going on this track. Some nice chug and groove and gallops. Wandering Waste of Oxygen. This one, for the most part, sticks to kind of like old school death metal, brutal death metal. Like, it's all about the chugs, the groove, triplet chugs, tremolos, blasts, but it does get technical towards the middle. And there's also some like really cool crawling riffs where they're going up and down the fretboard, like all over the place. And it just makes for this kind of almost cavernous kind of feeling, which is pretty sweet. But then we get into Insectoid Evisceration. This one, probably the least technical song on the album, and it definitely feels closer to brutal death or old school death, like Cannibal Corpse, Suffocation, Blood Red Throne, Vital Remains, like that kind of such. It's thrashy at times, but it grooves hard. Like, I will say the grooves on this track really hit you right in the penis. I meant stomach. Why did I say penis? But anyways, and of course you get like descending tremolo riffs, and even a slam part pops up. The Optic Chasm, I believe that's how you say it. They put an I for in between the CH and ASM instead of chasm. I think it's chasm. But anyways, lots of like technical legato going on with the guitars. It's again very frantic. There's a lot of that cryptopsy intensity. There's even a lumbering groove, which the grooves for the most part feel very much like straightforward death metal. Here this is more of a lumbering groove, kind of like Gatecreeper a little bit, but it does get into another slam. But then we go into the longest track of the album, Assembling Deformalities, or not deformalities, deformities. I wanted to get extra fancy. But this song probably might have been the most dynamic song on the album. It starts off with these like atonal yet jazzy guitars, but then you get parts where there's so much syncopation and groove. It almost made me think of Meshuggah a little bit. Like, there's some Meshuggah moments that show up here, but it also, again, gallops, gritty tremolos, it gets thrashy again. There's even a nice little lead melody that comes up before you get into like these angular riffs and blast beats, more lumbering groove. But yeah, this song, I really like the Meshuggah approach that they tried to incorporate on this track. But then in the closer, Ancient Forms, more syncopation, but more of like standard death metal syncopation with the chugs and the groove. Blast beats on top of atonal guitars. Even the chugs get atonal. Once again, goes back to having some thrash to it. More of those old school death metal tremolos, gravity blasts. And probably the best breakdown on the entire album shows up at the end of this track, which, how appropriate. How absolutely appropriate. I will say, production-wise, I think this is a pretty damn good production, mainly because of the mix. The bass is prominent, so I'm glad to hear what Gunnar is doing on the bass, and he is still killing it. Also, the guitars are prominent, the drums are prominent, the vocals are there, and the vocals are really unhinged. Like, lots of, like, mid-range growls, some gutturals, some screams. Pretty dynamic vocal performance, I will say. The drums are just going all sorts of different directions. Christopher doing a hell of a job on the drums. Really, in terms of anything I can find to be a negative, I would say perhaps I wish there could have been more guitar harmonies, like in the opening track towards the end where there was harmonies. I wish we could have gotten some more moments of that, but that's just a very minor gripe. I'm going to give this 4.5 out of 5. I think for a tech death / brutal tech death album, this is going to be tough to beat. I will go ahead and state that, because there's some like really cool like changes going on. It can go from old school death metal to like thrashy death metal to brutal death to tech death on a whim. While the transitions might be a little bit sharp, they're still really well done. At least the parts that they do switch to, they're really cool. So if you are a fan of, I would say like Cryptopsy, Suffocation, Recent Job for a Cowboy, Cannibal Corpse, Blood Red Throne, and even maybe a notch of Meshuggah, definitely check this out. But of course, those are just my opinions. What did you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff. But until next time, thank you for watching. Keep your horns high and your dreams wet.